Oh, thank you guys both so much for being here. I know that you guys answered a lot of the questions in our last panel series in November, but there were a lot of questions that we didn't get a chance to ask or elaborate on during the event last November. And a lot of people came up to us afterwards asking for an extended version or a part two. So this is us fulfilling that request. So I wanted to know if you guys wanted to introduce yourselves for a little bit, just in case people didn't catch part one, so that they know what they're getting themselves into, and then I can from there start asking some of the questions.
Haku Haku Kiki Shanti Kakti Shokwa Tasin. Oh, hello, hello. My name's Robin Redwater. Um, and I work on language under the daughter and nephew of the last language of the last first language speaker for the entire Chumash people, and I'm active in our cultural circle.
Hakuoku, Kianti Kakti Marianne, Shumalish. Hello, my name is Marianne. My grandmother was a plant medicine woman. Her mother, my great grandmother, came from the San Ynez Valley. My grandma was born at the reservation. So we have lineage to San Ynez, Goleta, Santa Cruz Island, Santa Barbara, Ventura, and Malibu. Um, I'm we're really active within our culture, and we have been most of our lives. It was a short time we lived up north for 5 years and had different relationships with the natives up there, but we're active with basketry, language, and we take our groups out, our Chumash group out. We just recently went and visited the condors, and so we have a lot of stuff that we do and trying to keep the ancestral practices up as modern day people.
That's amazing. Thank you guys so much both for what you're doing, not only for our community, but for your own community as well. The first question that I had, which is something I was really hoping to focus on in the last panel, but we, again, just didn't get a chance to get around to it. But many activists and organizers in Ventura County are actively involved in promoting social justice change, not only around disability rights, but women's rights, immigrant rights, etc. However, for many of us, we are still settlers on Chumash land. So, what is the best method for us moving forward to make sure that we're always appreciating and honoring the people who are still here, and the traditional stewards of the land?
You want to answer that first? So I'll go ahead and answer that, and Robin can chime in where she wants. I think first and foremost, a lot of the organizations and groups, it has been very far and few that they've actually reached out to us. We're usually reaching out to them, looking to meet, looking to partnership, and some people, even in the gay and trans community, kind of given us the runaround. They haven't really been interested and talking to us. And I think that comes, with a lot of background maybe of talking to other people. I mean, we get that with the same, even, like, so quote unquote women's orgs. They're women's orgs as long as they're not talking about Native women's rights or Native women's needs or resources. And that's a huge issue because we see it in present day time. And even if we bring it up or talk about it, then it's like, oh, no, no, this person is great. They're so nice. Maybe you just misunderstood. Maybe it's always us that is missing or misunderstanding instead of them actually still continuing to mistreat us. And we're very vocal about that. And we have called, some people out, including a local politician. And so people don't like that. It makes them more upset because we're like, hey, you claim to stand for native rights or native women, but it's only the people you want to pick and choose. And that's not the that's not what we're trying to bring an understanding to what we need and what we want, but it also needs to be centered around, like, just because I'm Chumash doesn't mean I get to, like, oh, I want to stand up for my own rights, but screw everybody else. Like, that's not the way it works. Like, what are you doing for the community you live in, as well as your Chumash community? Because if you're not working with your Chumash community and you're not doing things in that group, most Native communities across Turtle Island will consider you not to be active in your community, just using it for clout or other things because it takes work. It's a responsibility. It's a relationship, and relationships need to be nurtured. So I think reaching out to people, I always take what I hear about other people with a grain of salt, and unless I have a bad experience or what they're saying I can really see play out. It's not that difficult. It's pretty black and white. Usually most people are going to want to work with you, and going to try to work something towards better and not water things down. And so we have a lot of watering down in Ventura County. I think there's some things that are changing here and there, and there's some groups that are very, they're straightforward. They're about it. They say what they mean, and they do put in the work. But we have to, that whole respectability politics, like, oh, we're only going to talk to this group, or this group doesn't, say anything bad about police, or doesn't, really talk about getting rid of ICE so I can deal with them. Like, we need to get away from that because it's incredibly harmful and it keeps us locked in this cycle of colonialism.
Um,
Sorry, it's a very long-winded answer.
That's perfect.
I think it's kind of is multi-layered because on the institutional side of things, you see the we want to talk to you, but we want the digestible, quick version of your history and your culture. We don't really want to know the ins and outs, even though we're when they ask you to be there, the whole point they're like on the premise of, oh, we actually like want to learn culture and history. And I think that we run into most often is that like people want a romanticized version of Chumash and the Chumash community, or what we hear is the Chumash community is fractured, so we don't even want to bring them in, which isn't right. Also, because just because we're fractured people doesn't mean that we should just automatically be excluded. And then it does become an issue of there are people who just want to perform culture. They don't want accountability. And culture without accountability is just being performative. So I think it's when we're asking, like, how can we support these things? I think it's really like pushing for an institutional change of how we view Native Americans and asking for more than just a generalized version of a history and a land acknowledgement here and there.
I love that. And I will definitely be quoting you on culture without accountability is just being performative. I think that the best activists in the 805 area believe that as long as they're including Native women in the conversation that that's enough. But then they regularly refuse to put indigeneity at the forefront of the conversation or at the center, especially when they're fighting for movements that they don't directly relate to Chumash communities. So what are some specific things that you think that activists who are settlers should absolutely not do? Or what are just some of the more harmful things that you've seen activists who are settlers, like what they do in general, if that makes sense?
I think the most harmful thing I see is just because they don't understand our unspoken and spoken rules about kinship and how our communities worked prior to colonization. It doesn't have to make sense to them. And you can view it as a quote unquote mean rule, but that doesn't mean that it wasn't an ancestral rule. And I think that people have a hard time, like, I keep telling people like Chumash were not nice. Like we held people accountable. You did not get away with bad behavior in every sense of the word. Like we were very much accountable to our people in our village. And I just think that it gets a little lost in translation, especially when you talk about homeland and you're talking about stewardship, you need to listen to people who have lived experiences over people who are just coming to the forefront to be involved and say that they're a part of their community. Like, I think it does a disservice when you platform people who aren't doing things in their community. You platform people who don't have knowledge and who aren't like, I know that when I speak, and it's not only going to get back to the greater community, but I have my Chumash community, I have Northern Chumash, I have people on the reservation. There's all of these other people that are on top of me, not so much in a bad way, right? But it does make you think about your behavior and the way that you do things and the way that you represent your culture. So it is hard because, like, especially when we talk with land, there are territorial boundaries and rules, right? And I think people get a little bit confused when there's talk of like, well, this is, yes, we're all Chumash, but Chumash were territorial people, and each village site governed the village. And like, you can't just say, oh, I'm going to talk to one person about some place in Ventura. That it doesn't really work that way. It's a lot more complicated. And especially with the local groups, like the Ventura band, they have their group, but their group is not necessarily involved in like restoration efforts or really active within the community itself and like holding relationships. So it's hard when you're talking to people who don't maintain relationships, who aren't really seeking knowledge from elders. Like, then we're kind of just talking to people to talk to people at that point, and it gets like then that's how like misinformation gets carried, and sometimes a romanticized version of our people really gets pushed out that way because I think people just like, yes, it would be great if Chumash got along, but our community's fractured, and that is through colonialism, right? And I think we just need to be able to acknowledge that and acknowledge that we need to work together on this, and we need to focus on like whose knowledge is in the benefit of the land instead of focusing on like a person or where they come from
Exactly.
specifically.
And I also think, right, because of history and colonialism, especially in Southern California or California alone, people like to pick up history from the point of like, oh, Ventura, Santa Barbara, these are great, like the great history of surfing, like history only started in the 60s or something. And so they have this very romanticized version of like all these people on the beach together getting along. So they hippie-esque the culture, downplaying the accountability we had, downplaying the understanding and the importance of the land. We were very accountable with our people because we knew if we did not keep up the continuation of the work we were doing together, we couldn't survive. We weren't going to make it through the winters, droughts, the seasons that we had to have a relationship. If you can't have a relationship with the land, you're definitely not going to be able to have personal relationships with people. And we're so far from that that the understanding of it is almost completely gone with many people. We see how much people always talk about, like, I'm going to use SpaceX for an example, like, oh, we need to have more rockets because it's going to create jobs. But if our communities are only based on bringing in big warehouses, militaries, so that we can make money, quote unquote, make money and survive, and on um, tourism, then our individual economies and our city's economy is not strong. We're not able to hold it together. We're barely hanging on, and so a lot of times that translates in our relationships. Most people don't know their neighbors, the people that live in their community. Most people, we see the same people all the time because we're really trying to build community with other people. But it's really hard when there's skewed versions of what Native people should be. People often want to look at Native or Chumash people as like being very hippie-esque, being very new age, and that's just not the way it worked. Um, and people don't like the other version or the real version, so they much rather cozy up to somebody who has that image or has that type of mindset, or those are the things that they talk about, their practices in life, and they kind of gravitate towards them. I heard a white woman say, like, oh, I lived in Bolsa Chica, and I never saw the Indians out there doing any work or get involved. And it's like, but why do you need to see them to know if they're doing the work? A lot of times people are doing the work behind the scenes, and they don't, just like us, we don't come out to white women, or we don't come with our resume to show them what we're doing or what we have done. They're not going to be in our indigenous circles. So it's very,
And a lot of the time when like institutions are meeting with natives for a role specifically for natives, it's not a public meeting.
Exactly. And it's like we always have to prove ourselves to them, or what we've done or what we've accomplished or all the things that we're involved in order for them to see value in us. Just because you don't see us at a white woman's march doesn't mean we're not doing work. We're just not doing work for you.
Oh, I was muted, but I went, period. I was now snapping at the end there. Because yeah, just because you're not seeing it doesn't mean that the work's not happening. It just means that you're not you're not the person who needs to be in the room where it's happening, right?
Exactly, exactly. And a lot of times we're doing more work than they even know. And when they start to find out, they're like, oh, I had no idea. Yeah, I knew. I know you had no idea.
Right.
But my value is not based on how much work you see me do or how much work you think I've done.
Which I think in itself is a very like colonial concept in and of itself, this idea of constantly needing to be productive, right? Like there's an
Yes.
expectation that that if I'm out here protesting every single day and you're not, then I'm somehow more active than you in the community. Well, that's not necessarily the case, you know? As Robin mentioned earlier, culture without accountability is just performativity. So, that's going to be the headline of the series today. But one thing that you guys mentioned way back when, so I want to piece on that a little bit, is you mentioned that Chumash communities worked very differently prior to colonization and very differently than how communities see themselves now today. I think that a lot of activists and organizers that are settlers in the United States believe that building community is like the number one step to any kind of meaningful action when it comes to like a revolution or the downfall of imperialist and colonial empires. They believe that community is the number one thing that's going to save us. Because regardless of what governing system is in place, if there's a strong community, the community will persist despite any challenges they may have. So, with that idea from settler activists, what did Chumash communities do prior to colonization that's different that communities do now?
Well, historically, the elders in the community, so everybody, most people, a lot of people were related, but they watched the kids as they grew up, and kids had different jobs. They also had time to play, but they watched what you were good at, what you excelled at, and those usually became your roles within the community. If they saw you as a strong leader or really asking questions and trying to learn things, and they know that you're open to learning and understanding, but also wanting to know how you approach the problem solving, critical thinking. Like there was a lot of that went on. And nowadays what we see from the greater community is people hear that you're native or indigenous, and they right away like, oh, we want to talk to you, and what about this, thinking that you are automatically born with all of this knowledge. And that's not real in today's world. Historically, yes, because we lived in our villages with our elders all in the same area as they do on the reservation. So it's very different. And I think also, settlers also have this idea because of maybe that they could not be religious now, but maybe because of their upbringing, their parents were, or they saw things in church, how they functioned, how things went. Maybe that resonates with them and makes more sense to them. But I also think I understand. I wasn't born during the whole hippie era. I understand and see how there was some benefits to it, but I also think it did a little harm because they also kind of mishmash religion, indigenous practices, and everything to make it, throughout history, there's been people that lived on territories, and there's been um, people that did not get along and problems. Part of life is having problems. Everybody kind of tries to cover that up as we'll all be living together in great harmony and nothing will ever go wrong. We're always going to have issues, but we are fighting for a better world, to not live in the current one we live in. And we are so far from, right? The United States loves, they've stole the image of the eagle. They've stolen the name of the chief to use it as a chief of police, a chief of the fire department. There is a lot of aspects that they liked from indigenous communities, but they didn't like us. And they put those roles, those titles for roles of people in harmful roles. Not so much maybe the fire department, even though they do really align themselves with the police department. They're there to help. But even that group of people can be very toxic and very masculine. And so I think people have to understand that sometimes you may not totally understand, even if we tried to explain to you how this system of accountability worked and how people were chosen for certain roles. Not everybody was a dancer, not everybody was a singer, not everybody was a hunter. There was a Chumash had a whole secret society. So there was a lot of things that were involved that most people are never going to understand or even can wrap their head around. And that's okay. But just understand that platforming anybody and everyone is also not beneficial to us as a people. And it doesn't mean that we're being mean or that we're being rude or we're not trying to include people, but especially if you're trying, if you've tried and tried, if you're trying to teach people and you're trying to help people to understand, but they're still heading more moderate or left or right, excuse me, those are not people that represent us. Those are people with their own individual, um, they have an agenda, and it's not an indigenous agenda, but they mask their indigeneity over it, and it's easy to fool people.
I think when I reference like we had a much different society than before is mostly in reference to the fact that we had a matrilineal society. But I think a good phrase that a lot of Indians know that can kind of sum up the Indians' problem now is too many chiefs, not enough Indians. We have too many people who want to be a chief. Don't have enough Indians who want to be the Indians. Personally, I don't want to be a chief. They deal with all the problems. Give me my language book and some plants, and I'll be fine in my corner. But I think we say that because there's a lot of I think to not acknowledge that colonialism has affected our people is I think it's just wrong and it doesn't accurately portray our people. And I think I see when people are disconnected from the communities, didn't grow up in the community, and they come into the community, they have an attitude of I deserve this because I am Chumash and give it to me. Well, hold on. This family and 7 generations of her family works closely with this linguist, and it has very personal notes in there. Who are you to demand that from her?
I also think people don't understand
Like
that.
there is a responsibility, and we have seen time and time again that our people have come into the language and have taken it and commodified it. They've taken it and changed it and sold it. Like there's a lot. So I think like there's reason, like we have lost almost everything, so there's a reason why some tribes do choose to heavily protect what they do have. And it's not to be mean, but it's to prove yourself. Like I took the time to know Ernestine, get to know her family, earn her trust, and have access to the Harrington notes.
Even though we have a notes that her great grandmother worked with one of our relatives, they harvested together in like the 1600s, and there's been a relationship. There's pictures that we have in the 90s with Ernestine and my aunts. There's always been a working relationship there. We were just not. We were younger. Well, they weren't even born yet, and so, but the families have always worked together at some capacity. And I think people often don't understand that for a chief, a Chumash chief, which was called a what, they had a council of advisors, they had spiritual counselors, and they also had an elders council. So they worked together with many different groups to make final decisions and how to problem solve and how to move forward with things. So it wasn't just one person, being showcased as a superstar. That's not what it was like then. But Hollywood also has done us a disservice of all these old Western movies that our grandparents and parents, great grandparents grew up with, that shows that type of scenario, that it was only one person. They made all the decisions. They were the main person. It was always a man. And for women, it could be, and for Chumash, it could be a woman also. There wasn't a rule that it can only be a man. There was women chiefs. The last chief was a woman, 1869.
And I think that like there is like a misconception that like yes, we are a fractured community, the Chumash community, oftentimes by whatever. But the real groups of Chumash who know that it's important to keep in communication with each other make that effort. Not everybody likes or agrees with what the reservation does, but there are the only federally recognized Chumash, and we understand that there are brothers and sisters, and that to have a connection with them is important. You have to.
Thank you for that answer. I just didn't want to interrupt. Wanted to make sure you guys felt like you were able to answer everything. But you did mention earlier, and then you repeated again just now, that the Chumash community is matrilineal and has been matrilineal. Do you think that the fight for the movement for land back and in general any other justice efforts should also be matrilineal in
Yes,
focus?
and it's being heavily led by women right now. Like most of these land acquisitions, land preservations are mostly all women. And it's
Yeah.
not that we haven't, made the call, send out the message, try to make connections. it's the ego many times that stops them from like, well, who started this? When
Well,
did it
not only
start?
that, I think on like the indigenous front lines anyway, I think you can like see that there is a trend of like having a lot of women. Like my cousin on the reservation before he passed, he'd always say like the women are ready to fight and the men just have to go back them up.
I love that. Um, I wanted to know if you were interested in explaining it, and if not, then we can just move on. But the difference between just general knowledge and sacred knowledge.
Oh yeah, that's
So
a
there's a really, I see that we actually right before this I had gotten an email and I was like, who did they ask? Because where did this come from? Like I think too, like you, like I run into this often where like somebody knows that you're Chumash and they're like, oh well, tell me all of this about this plant. I would love to know all of that about plants. I know what I know about my native plants, but I will acknowledge that it is limited. I'm not a know-it-all, be-it-all, and I think that a lot of our communities are we're struggling to survive most of this history, right? So I think that general knowledge is like people who just like the general things about Chumash that you kind of hear all the time. And then more sacred knowledge is really those people who have taken the time to really get into their stories and get into documents. Like when I translate language, I'm translating Harrington notes that haven't been translated before. So we're discovering stories in the process of me learning how to translate. Um, and there's nothing wrong with people who have general knowledge. I think that for a long time I had general knowledge until I took it upon myself to really like ask my elders questions and do my own research. And I think like I'm not whenever I'm like asked to provide too much information, I have no problem citing my sources. There's actually a lot of like there are a lot of things that have been passed down that's just spoken, but because of the universities' histories with linguists and knowledge, there a lot of our stories have been recorded. So I think it's a matter of not only when you're trying to search for information, I think it is also the responsibility of the person to really like research the person who you're asking information about. And I don't think it's wrong to speak to people who have more general knowledge and get their opinion on a project or what their feedback on it. But I also think it's equally as important to seek out people who do have specific knowledge and are really trying to tell the history as it is and not make it digestible or nice or shorten it.
Yeah, and I think that, for a long time, my aunts, they have a lot of recordings from my grandmother and her notebooks and all her information because she was a plant medicine woman. And they've made it very clear that they have no issue with giving me this information or opening it up. Because a lot of things, they're like, how do you remember that? I'm like, because I watched her and everything she did. But they made it very clear that this information is not to be made public because they see how it gets stolen, how it gets commodified, how people claim it as their own. And my aunt, these elders are still alive that have seen people that are, some considered elders now have disrespected my grandmother when she was alive. And they're not having that. They don't want these people to ever have the information. And I understand that and I respect that because they don't forget, they remember, they understand what happened. And so if those people have done harm 40, 50 years ago, my gosh, these elders don't forget. So I appreciate that and I listen. I may not always agree with some things, but I think it's really special to have come from families that have that information.
Yes, thank you. And when it comes to people, like you said, commodifying sacred knowledge and therefore it needing to be kept private, one thing that comes to mind is how settlers interact with the earth and nature in general. And I think that colonization, as we mentioned in the last panel, has done a very good job of convincing humans that we are above nature and
Yeah.
one with nature, right? Like that we're somehow better than, and this is something that you mentioned on a call years ago with me, Marianne, for an interview that I did for college, about how, for the majority of human existence, we lived with in one with animals like coyotes, etc. Whereas now there's this idea of like the apex predator and this almost like false understanding of where humans fit in to the natural world. And I think in that process, settlers and colonialism and like the industrialization period itself has done a really great job at destroying the earth, poisoning it with pesticides, poisoning it with big oil, cars, planes, plastic use, and millions of other general day-to-day actions that settlers take. So what is some general knowledge, not sacred knowledge, but what is some general knowledge that you think that people should take while they are still occupying this land to start giving back to the earth and existing in one with the nature in the way that kind of they were born to do in the first place?
I think a good start is finding local, like the land trust. They're restoring Harmon Canyon, like trying to find any local restoration efforts and donate, or even they have volunteer hours. Get some restoration work under your belt. Like there's not only like with money, there's a lot of things that you can do that like directly will help the plants and animals. Unfortunately, there seems to be more restoration volunteer opportunities in Santa Barbara County, Ventura County. uh, as far as I know, outside of the land trust, has zero active restoration sites, which is really sad. But there is organizations like Mini Nature Reserve who will sometimes have a pop up, or um,
Have seeds, plants.
Go to your local. As much as I trust me, I do not like going to city council. Bug your local city council about installing native plants by local people. Like these are small ways that we can really try and implement and push for native plants in spaces where they want to hire contractors from LA to put in all these non-native plants. Like
and pay thousands of dollars.
There's really small ways that we can help contribute, and that can even just look like going to Harmon Canyon and supporting Harmon Canyon. Like a couple years ago, a lot of people did not know that even existed in Ventura County, and it is a nice piece of land where they're restoring. There's a lot of native plants. It's a really good place. People are so like when we table, we ask people, do you know where acorns come from? And the number one answer we get is, or we ask them what comes from oak trees, like what grows off of oak trees. And the number one answer we get is olives. So it just shows you like how far removed people are to the land itself. And I think just pushing anybody towards educating themselves on restoration efforts, why it's important for native plants. Even butterflies. Get people in with talking to them about the monarch butterflies. There's really small ways that you can get people involved that really will make a big impact, because unless you have the people really bugging institutions like the city, we unfortunately are not going to be able to have access to things like restoration. And it's not only good for us, right? Like it just overall will help our community, and we need access to open space. There's no reason why Santa Barbara County has like I think like 10 open spaces and parks and like designated nature areas, and Ventura does not have that. So I think just like I said, I like to tell people to just like, I think plants are a good place to start because people love plants. You never know, some people are insect people. You can get the birders into it. There's a lot of different people you can get together to start small, and it really grows into a big thing.
Yeah, I think and that even becomes an issue, right? When you talk about how important native trees are for our oxygen, for fires. Some people get really upset, and we just recently went through this, not even 2 weeks ago, with the city council here in Ventura, talking about eucalyptus trees and how they're invasive trees and they're from Australia. But right, monarchs have adapted to them because of the loss of our native landscape. But that doesn't mean if you start replanting the narrow leaf milkweed and other native trees that they won't start to return. They recently cut down 9 eucalyptus trees, and everybody was really upset.
As a designated monarch wintering site.
So I said, the old and the 6 trees eucalyptus trees we should get rid of. Obviously not during wintering season, because you have to always add that disclaimer because people are like, oh, they said to remove it right now. But start to thin out the other eucalyptus trees and start to plant native trees. The issue is I shouldn't say we, the state wants to keep building, but the more we build and more open space we take up, the less opportunity we have to plant native trees. You're not going to solve homelessness with overpriced apartments that nobody can afford. You're not going to solve the fire issue without having native landscapes. Not that that is a guarantee, because I kind of feel like there is no guarantees, but it's going to significantly help. We have thousands of years of history that this helped and it worked and it helped protect our environments.
Well, and even dissecting this whole monarch conversation, I was getting really upset because a lot of these people who claim to be about butterflies, their argument centers on the eucalyptus trees and monarchs will only be in it. But from an indigenous perspective, across California, there's stories about monarchs migrating here. So why, and I get very upset about it because my whole, I think it's like a really such an ego thing. Like, you think that at the point in time that eucalyptus trees got introduced to the Americas, then only at that point did migration begin. Even after, like, once they touched down here, there was such like land degradation and biodiversity loss. Like, it makes no sense that only then, when they planted the eucalyptus trees, that migration would start. It, like, that argument really irks my soul.
It had been happening and happening for, thousands of years. So I do believe we do see a lot of research when you start to introduce the native plants back into their habitat, that they do start to flourish. Sometimes you have a good year, sometimes you have a bad year. The soil needs to be repaired. There's a lot of steps that go through it. But when you start taking these steps and you have people have to go out, they have to hike, not with their earbuds, no headphones, no music, just be out in nature listening to the natural sounds of the birds, the wind, your own breath, listening to yourself breathe, really getting out there and having that relationship with the land, seeing how beautiful it is, and having a sense of emotion of wanting to save it, seeing how beautiful the trees are, the different smells and scents that you get out there around native plants, really understanding that without them, we can't exist as humans. My grandmother always told me the animals need to be here because once they're gone, we will no longer be here. And so for me, at a very young age, that was kind of devastating. And so we really, really, really have like real personal relationships with, I hate calling it wildlife because I said they're free. They're free. We call them wild because they can come and go as they please and do what they want and don't have to live in a box. But we classify that as being wild. And it's not wild, it's the ultimate freedom, and we just keep trying to push them out of those situations to fit our narrative now. But we can live another, that's a whole other issue. But I do believe alternative housing is possible, and it doesn't have to be tiny homes, and it doesn't have to be 4-story buildings that just look terrible.
It's filling these apartments that already exist.
Yeah. And also just offering like Quail Springs has some alternate housing that I think is really beautiful and possible. And why shouldn't people be able to live the way they want to live? Why do we have to live the way they tell us we have to live? I have such a hard time with that. I have a hard time accepting that.
Speaking of people who have a hard time of accepting things, when many people think of land back, I think a common misconception is that settlers imagine like two separate things, like reservations for natives, that's the land back, and then they just continue living on in big cities like Los Angeles with zero changes to anything at all in their lifestyle. And so essentially no real land back. Like that's what they picture when they think of land back. And then when they hear about real land back, which means, like seizing control and putting the power back into the hands of the indigenous nations who are, natural stewards of that land for multiple thousands of years, the anxiety starts to kick in, and people start thinking like, well, we've never lived this way before. Like, I have my great great grandma has been living in Ohio for this amount of years. You know what I mean? Like my entire family's from here. We don't know anything. What's going to happen? They're going to kick us back to Germany. They're going to kick us back to Italy. What's going to happen? And then on top of that, to just take it an extra layer deeper, I think that many people of color also would not consider themselves settlers. You have Chicanos who self-identified Chicanos who would not consider themselves settlers because many of their ancestors are generally from the region of the Americas. And then you have a lot of Black Americans who refuse to be looped into the settler category because their ancestors did not come here willingly. So, what is the role of people of color in assisting for the fight for land back?
I do agree that our African Americans shouldn't be called settlers because it wasn't their choice to have been made. I had come recently had come I wish I had it on my phone. I was like reading the scholarly article where it was like dissecting like why we need like I completely forgot the word that he uses, but it was going into like this aspect of it. So I think that is really important to state that they are not settlers. They didn't have a choice in that, and I think that we do need to have come to a consensus on what we need to call it that highlights that they are here and it was not their choice. When of course, when we're talking about settlers, we are mostly referring to the colonizers and descendants of colonizers because they're the ones who often reap the benefits. Like there is a family who inherited Spanish soldier quarters in Montecito. Those are straight up settlers now.
Yeah, I think for me, I also feel the same way. We were taken out of our village, forced to go live in the mission system under threat, under fear. And I feel like this is the same thing that happened to Black people, right? They were kidnapped from their village sites. As many of them are tribal people, stolen from their tribes and forced to come thousands of miles. Trust me, I feel like most of them would have not come here. They didn't want to be here, just like we didn't want to be in the mission system. Um, I do think land back is possible.
And when we say land back, like I want to make it clear, like when specifically our group, when we always talk about like if one day we had a piece of land, it wouldn't just be for us and nobody gets to come. We would 1000% have space and time open for the public. And our goal has always been restoration and preservation. And part of restoration and preservation is making it available so people see how valuable it is, right? You hear people all the time like, I'm not going to have any plants in the winter. That's absolutely not true. There's so many native plants that bloom there. And I think it's just really like having access to these spaces to open that door to people and show them like you may have the preconceptions and misconceptions of what land back is, but it like what talk to your local community and what that really looks like. Like I said, like our hope have always been to have land for restoration and preservation and to house elders that can't afford it because they should not be homeless on their homelands.
And not being able to afford or being disabled, indigenous person, and not being, living hundreds or thousands of miles away because you can't survive here. That's, I don't believe that that is their fault at all. That is the system. This is the same system that keeps putting us and other people in the same situation where people are just fending for their lives every day, it feels like. Land back is so crucial to the planet's health, to your community's health, even people that you may not like or have the same values or ideas. It benefits them. It benefits you when we have open space that's been restored and helps deter or stop fire from coming to these areas because it's such an open space and highly oxygenated, and these plants thrive in a fire. But if a fire happened, it's not going to be like native plants where you have a whole all out torch. So there's just so many things. I think really talking to people, and I know, and this is a hard conversation I've had a couple of times with people in Santa Barbara, yesterday being one of them, a couple of attorneys and different people, and knowing and understanding that people are really afraid and upset for natives to have their own piece of land because they don't know what that means, and it scares them for us to be like we're living on our own now without anybody watching us, but they want us to be monitored and cared for and looked after. So, like, God forbid we have a party like all these things that terrify them, they have this misconception because it goes back historically, what's always told to them. Native people are lazy, Native people are drunks, and all these old Westerns, once again, that depict this type of behavior is deeply ingrained in these very wealthy people. They want to know who their neighbors are in, moving in, or if there's an open piece of land, who is buying it, who's going to live there, and what are they going to put up there. And they fight, they spend millions of dollars in lawsuits to keep that from happening. And so it takes a lot of relationship building and talking to people, which is exhausting because it could be a couple of years of talking to people, and you're ultimately trying to convince them of why you need a piece of land. But regardless, if you raise the money and can buy that piece of land, it should be that easy. I've raised the money. They don't, land back opportunities for them to actually give land freely back is almost non-existent in California.
It's usually a buyback.
It's usually a buyback, and sometimes at a lower price. But they still have issues with that. They're afraid of everything. They're afraid of our cultural practices. Yet there's so many places that want us to hold a ceremony or do something so that they can come see and watch. And we always say it's not a circus. We're not here to perform for you.
And not only that, I think it's also just the automatic assumption that Native people don't want to share anything with you. Because I guarantee you, if you ask most landless Native people if they had land to host public events to share their culture, they would. The reservation has public events. You know what people here say? Oh, it's too far. So I think there's also there's a lot of things to dissect and really get into. But again, it's not easy to put on public events. For our cooking classes, you have to have insurance, you have to have everything in line. And we pay for our own insurance. It's a lot. There's a lot of barriers to having public events in especially certain cultural things. It is a lot.
Even an open space for a light hike, there's still an insurance form. There's still things you have to go over. Adults more oftentimes than children, if they understand that this is a medicinal native plant, they will pull a piece off of that plant and put it in their mouth faster than a child will. And they don't understand. Nobody seems to realize that acorns are nuts. So there's people with serious nut allergies, and we're like, why didn't you tell? We ask you on the form, do you have a nut allergy? They'll say no, or they'll completely skip the question. So all those things, us owning land, all these things have to be taken into account too, in very finely detail, because of the fact that people are also so ready to sue you and try to take things from you, take money, land. So it's a very scary situation to try to plan out, but it is possible. And we do need help. We do need people that are either going to donate money, volunteer with us on the land to help restore it, and understand that this is going to draw native raptors. We're really trying to restore our burrowing owls, things that we need that are almost extinct in this area. Even our native animals should not go extinct on this land that have existed for thousands of years. And I don't know completely how to relay that to people, how important that is.
You segued me perfectly into that next conversation, which is that, for a lot of us, we consider, and us meaning settlers who were raised under the guise and the worldview of colonization, many of us consider housing and being fed and having access to water as things that you have to earn. And I think that translates down, it trickles down to knowledge about animals as well. We think that animals are supposed to be out there fighting for their access to water. Meanwhile, we're sucking up all their access to clean water for our AI usage.
Mm-hmm.
And things like that, right? And so, what are some ways that people can support animal life here, knowing that we constantly struggle with droughts and that we have animal control to come out, which, in my opinion, harms more than it helps. And generally, people's inability to feel empathy for other living things on this earth.
I think honestly, right now that I just seen and I think it's in February, they are having a meeting to declare the mountain lions an endangered species, and that will offer a lot of protections for them. So if you can go online and find, if you live in the Central Coast or Southern California, sign that petition. Unfortunately, it is a lot of pushing for institutional change, because you need Endangered Species Act, you need that designation to help protect them and the land that they live on. And then other than that, like I said, just advocating for the city to implement native plants like local restoration. Like I hate to like focus on institutional change, but like truly right now, in order to really help these animals, you have to like I am so blown away that Santa Barbara has a clean water committee outside of city council that has more power than city council, investigates fines and publishes who's been throwing trash or just polluting waterways. And it's like they're considered part of the city, but they're outside city council and they have more power than city council. We need to start having more committees like that within Ventura or wherever you live, to really get a grip on some of this destruction and curbing some of it, and really like having the public advocate for this.
I think also, we don't live in Sataquai anymore, but when we did, we would leave out water, especially it gets really hot in the summer there. We would leave out water. We've also hiked a few miles taking water out on a certain mountaintop. I won't say, taking 5 gallons of water each out to the coyotes out there, make it accessible for the animals. So we have done a lot of that. Somebody
I will say, when we were each carrying 5 gallons of waters, there were so many hikers that helped us carry a gallon of water each.
Yes,
So
they felt for us.
they wanted to help too. So I guarantee you, there's at least a couple people around you willing to, even though you gotta grin and bear it sometimes with city council and institutions, they will help you push for the shared fight.
Yesterday I was in a meeting with somebody and he said, "Oh, so you're a guerrilla wildlife where you take out water in certain sources out there." He's like, "Because people get really upset and report that." And I'm like, "I'm not here for them. We're trying to help the animals. These are our relatives. Like, we literally talk to the animals." And I'm like, people will probably think we're absolutely nuts. But I do think people can leave water out. They can have a better understanding of that this is their land. And a lot of things that I see, right, with the flooding we see, and water always returns to its natural pathways. Like,
not exposing local trails or
yes,
sensitive habitat on social media. Number one thing right now, do not post it on social media. That is the guaranteed to destroy your ecosystem. Because when I'm telling you, like, I've gone to the backcountry where places like had barely anybody was going, and it's full and so much trash. Like, I genuinely have been taking pictures and emailing Fish and Wildlife and talking to friends that I have here that have friends in that work through Fish and Wildlife, because the destruction that follows when people post these spaces on social media is insane. I think I really want to underline that message. Please do not post local areas. Some things are for people to figure out on their own. Not everything needs to be so easily accessible.
exactly. And I'm also, I'm a staunch believer. I don't use AI. I don't use Chat GPT. I'm like so against it. And yeah, I just feel like we don't need ways to lessen our critical thinking or our thought process. But I think helping and doing restoration, leaving out water for animals, especially during a drought, is really hot. Also, stop moving into their territory. Stop moving into the mountains, into the backcountry. Stop trying to build your home along the Sespe River and Fillmore, where we see now it's houses are destruction from the water taking it. Like, water is always going to find a way go back to its original pathways that it went through, no matter what we do. So when there's a heavy rain, it's hard, or there's a fire, it's really difficult for me to feel sorry for people who have intentionally put their house where there is tons of animals and it is a fire zone. And we try to tell people, we try to warn them, and they're like, well, I have money, I can build wherever I want, or I can do, and that's the attitude, right? I can do whatever I want. This is my land. And I hate that song, by the way. This land is not made for you and me. Land is not your land. This land belongs to the animals first and foremost, and the plants. And we are here just visitors for a short time. So the whole ownership and like ego, it just really bothers me. I hate that song so much because I feel like it makes people feel emboldened to say, well, I can do this. Well, I can do that. Well, actually you can't, and you shouldn't. It's not okay. We have to have respect and love for the land as we do as our own body. We make sure it's clean. We make sure that we're healthy. We take care of it. Like, why don't we have that same understanding and respect for the land and the animals? Don't speed at night on those back roads where animals are going to be crossing or be out.
You mentioned being a guerrilla wildlifer. Can you talk a little bit more about I think a lot of people would like to do something similar. And I think that a lot of, like you mentioned, a lot of people get upset like, well, you don't have the government's permission. Like, I think Mini Nature Reserve posted something on Instagram the other day, and I've been quoting it ever since, but they said something along the lines of like native plants don't need your permission.
Yes,
Yes.
I love.
Just go and plant it, you know? And so could you talk a little bit about what that looks like and how we can support in that way while being mindful to not destroy more in our wake, you know, how you mentioned Robin, like taking photos for social media, etc.
I think really just focusing like if you can, even if you can just have a couple native plants on your patio, like as we just our hope is to get and on it, try and get local seed, local plants. You want to have local seed and plants from your within your county. You don't want to really go too far. You want for biodiversity purposes, we just don't want to be taking like all plants for Santa Barbara and planting them all from Ventura County. Like we want to be really careful about that. But I think like the next best option, other than like helping out Mini Nature Reserve and installing plants there, is really just like if pushing your city colleges to have a mini nature reserve or a native plant garden, like anywhere you can to sort of like plant the seed in people's head of like even take them to a local preserve that you have with native plants. Like I think there's a lot of ways that you can help, and like there's a lot of small, sometimes it doesn't always have to be these big things. It doesn't always look like an 8 hour volunteer day for restoration work. It doesn't look like my week out on the island for restoration. Sometimes it really can just be like spreading awareness and talking to people about it.
Yeah, I think also really, I like to, when we do our hikes or when we do our classes, I kind of like to set the scene for people. Like, imagine this, how this land looks right now without the power lines, without the phone lines, without these palm trees, because palm trees are not native to here. This beautiful landscape that you could see from here to the beach. We can't do that now because we have so many obstructions. You have noise from planes, you have the rooftops of homes, you have all the power lines. A really understanding of having birds and animals roam freely most of the time. Even now, wildlife is not going to bother you if you're not making a fuss or trying to bother it. You go along and you try to get away from it, just go your own way. They're going to leave you alone. We always bother them, really telling people like, don't go onto the backcountry unless you're absolutely prepared, and that takes a lot. Prepare to have a prepared list. um if we are having a drought or if it is really, really hot in the summer, as sometimes it is, take out some water out there. You can take and leave water out there for animals. You don't have to tell anybody, you don't have to get anybody's permission. Birds will come to it, raccoons, even bigger wildlife will come out to it because then they suffer. And the reason they're coming in closer and closer to our communities is because they can't find water out there. You know, we've blocked it through dams. We're constantly, now they want to start storing it underground so that we don't have a water shortage. We've been here in Ventura, the water here is recycled and desanitized. Sewage, which I think is absolutely disgusting. But we're at the point where there's not enough clean water that's what has to be done. So the cities will tell you, they don't ever want to tell anybody, no, you shouldn't water your lawn every other day and you shouldn't wash your car once a week. But those are all things we can do on our own. I honestly never wash my car unless there's a rainstorm. I just don't wash it at all. I realize that might not be an option for everybody, but maybe that looks like every 2 months washing your car, leaving out water during a drought or fire season, trying to plant native plants around certain areas that animals or have seen them before come down and graze on. And I don't mean cows because cows aren't native here, but I still, I know we have cows everywhere. I'm talking about more like mountain lions, bobcats, raccoons,
All of our native birds.
coyotes. Yeah, the native birds. Love the native shrubs and plants. So there's a lot of things I think people can do. Be mindful of when you're out and about. If you're a hiker, when the mating season is for rattlesnakes, because rattlesnakes, there's they they can get upset just like any other animal would. Make sure that you're not poking around off trail in areas that you could stumble onto bobcat kittens or something. Like just being really mindful and understanding. And I always like to tell people, no matter who you are or where you're at, when we say a prayer, we don't mean a religious prayer. Just go out and talk to the land like, I'm here to visit. Thank you for sharing with me. Thank you for being here for us. And I'm not here to do any harm. I'm not here to take from you. I'm only here to give and help and give out that spiritual offering, because plants understand, they hear, we know this is a fact. The science now proves this. We know that there are spirits that still linger and visit. We know that there are animals out there. Like if you go out there with a clear and very loving heart with a good intention, animals feel that vibration. They smell it, they sense it. It's a hormone that our bodies put off. I think that's so important for people to understand. Some people think it's weird, or they're not really an animal person, so they don't understand that. But they really have to start digging deep within themselves and understanding that we need this, we need the earth, we need the land, we need the territories that we're in, because they want to tear up everything everywhere. So where are we going to run to? We're going to have anything.
And I promise, I know you're tired after your workday, but if you just do your 20-minute ride to your local trail and take a walk, you'll feel so much better. Like like getting there feels like you're climbing a mountaintop, but once you're there, it's pretty easy. Like I get it. It's you're tired, you want to go home, you're just over it, but it is really good for you and your body to go out in nature and spend time out there.
And don't leave your trash behind, or don't be afraid to pick up somebody else's trash that got left behind. If you're able, pack it into your backpack and just throw it away when you get out or when you get home. Like I feel like there's so many things that we can do, small things, but they make a huge difference collectively.
I 100% agree, and I'm glad that you guys were able to give such like in-depth answers. I wanted to know what you guys think about the Oxnard PAC's Native Plant Fest, and if slash are you guys involved in that?
We tabled last year, so we like to call it our artifact table because we just remade artifacts. So we have a table where we just like, and we'll have shells, acorns, and it's just like shows like some Chumash weaponry. Um, so I like the Native Plant Fest has raised awareness within the county. I do think that they could do a better job advocating for restoration within Ventura County and get the ball rolling on that.
This year we won't be a part of it, only because there's just been so much happening this week, and we really have to go see our elder. I went on Tuesday, but she's not doing well. So we made the decision that we're just sometimes, other things are more important. And we're hoping that that they would get bigger, that they'd offer more. So when I mean offering more, is not everybody is just so focused on white sage, right? White sage, it's almost extinct. Everybody, like I understand that, but there are other plants, like our oaks are. There's a new gold spotted beetle, and it's made its way to Ventura County. It's been verified. And this could potentially kill all our ancient old growth oak trees. And that'll be devastating for not only California and the city, the county, but also for us as a people, because we rely on acorns. We go harvesting at least twice a year when it's time.
I think it's 90% of California's wildlife rely on acorns for their diet.
So
like a majority of their diet.
This is our native squirrel, which is not the little reddish one you see out. It's the gray one that lives out in the backcountry. Our mule deer, which is not the, like everybody thinks it's like Bambi, and it's not. So it's very terrifying for us. Our woodpecker, we love our woodpecker so much. It's very scary to know.
One of my favorite birds are a stellar jade. It's a blue jay that has like a black. It looks like a little mohawk in the front. They're such cool birds. I encourage anybody to look it up. I love those birds. Those birds are cool, and they're hard to find. I didn't think I'd be a bird person. Look at me. Like there's a lot of things you can find out when you go out into nature.
So it's terrifying to realize that so many things we're at that point of extinction. We're not like, oh, maybe in a few years. It's like the time is now. Our I can't even think of the name of it. I want to say talk, but what is it? The dogbane. English name is dogbane. That is nearly extinct. It exists. There's a couple of patches that exist, One is back in the backcountry on federal land that you can't get to without a federal permit, and the other is in San Ynez Mountains. And so this is a vital source also for our basketry and cordage. So it's really scary. And we've been talking about these things for a long time, but I feel like people just don't really listen. They're not really interested. But the moment somebody they like or somebody that they're interested on social media starts bringing it up, then everybody has awareness to it. Now everybody wants to do something. Like we needed to do something 100 years ago, like way before we were born, any of us. The restoration should have started, and unfortunately we just continue to destroy things. And I don't know if anybody knows, but CEQA wasn't put in place till like 1995, and it was kind of secretly dismantled overnight within a couple of nights, through Newsom and his new budget, right? He put money in for some things but then took away from other things, and this single-handedly is what protected ancient sites, artifacts that are found on the land, and some of these ancient plants and trees, which is really, really scary. And I don't know what's going to happen, but it is a very terrifying real life feeling in real time, because people will be like, oh, well, you don't really need acorns. You could buy other things. No, we need acorns. We use these. This is part of our ancestral meal that we prepare, we make, we eat, and we also share with other people. So we need that. It's still part of our life and part of what we do, and we use it in our jewelry. There's just so many things that we use it for. It's really, really scary, but we're in that time.
And then this is my last question, and then I'll open it up in case there's anything that you guys wanted to focus on as well. But just because we were talking about housing earlier, I kind of wanted to loop it back. But in many areas around the world, like Mexico, for example, when you see communities that are very close-knit and they put a lot of value on community care, there are fewer people than what we in the States would consider, quote, homeless. So, not to say that homelessness doesn't exist in tight-knit communities or in any other country around the world, but for many of us culturally, it's very difficult to imagine a family member, even one of our more volatile family members, being homeless if we have a house, right? And that's very different. That's very contrasting to colonial nuclear families, where we just see like one mom, one dad, and a child without any intergenerational family members living with them, like grandparents or anything like that. And prior to colonization and the colonized ideas that housing is something you earn, again, this is like we were talking about animals, right? Also like deserving to be able to live freely without fear of, running out of water, running out of food, and going extinct. And so prior to colonization, and the idea that anything that we have to do, that we're placed on this earth to work for things, to earn things, rather than there just being an abundance of things that we can live with, what did people do within community to be able to support each other within the Chumash community specifically? And is that something that you think we can begin doing now as we continue to support Indigenous sovereignty and the fight for land back?
Yeah, I definitely. So for us, especially, I've always lived in an intergenerational home. So it's weird for me not to be in a intergenerational
Yeah, it
home.
was funny because we have somebody who works with our cultural circle, and he's like, "There's like so many people in the house," and I said, "That's nothing. Ernestine grew up with 15 people in her house."
15 people in one
I told
bathroom.
her, I told them, Wayne, you don't know Indians, and we are all stacked up everywhere.
Yeah, that's how it's always been, right? We've always cared for great grandmothers, grandmothers, parents, kids, in you typically one home. And it was always like that in the old days because everybody wanted to stick together, and they knew that they were stronger sticking together than being separated, especially during, I mean, nobody likes to think about it, but it's really, I mean, Simi Valley, Santa Paula, Ojai, they all had chapters of the Ku Klux Klan. And I was hearing some terrible stories the other day of how they would ride into communities and, honk and honk the horn and yelling, breaking windows, just terrifying communities. I know that they went into Rose Park in the late 50s, early 60s, and we had family members that chased them out with beer bottles, threw Molotov cocktails. They never went back again. So these communities have stuck together because of the fact that they're stronger together, and they know that they couldn't let other family members live out in other areas because it was literally life or death. It was very dangerous for them. And also, we're so used to that. We learn so much. Like waking up for, it's going to make me cry. Waking up for me at my grandma's house with like 23 other cousins, everybody piled up on the floor asleep, but watching her go outside to do her sunrise ceremony every morning. This is just who she was and what she did, and watching her tend to her plants, watching her bring in plants, make me a tea to drink, even though, she didn't add sugar or honey. And I didn't want to drink it because I could see little grains of dirt in there. And she like, you have to drink that. You need to drink it. It's good for you. Just drink it. And so I would drink it. But those smells, like I remember her so vividly. And that's what made me who I am. Like those types of things you can never forget, and never, you understand why her way of life was so important to her in those days, and why she always fought for who she was. Ever since I was born, all I can ever her remember is like, you're Chumash, don't let anybody tell you different, don't you ever forget, and you always need to live with everything that I taught you. And she was so firm about it, so stern. And I used to think, God, why is she mean about it? But she wasn't being mean. I understand now why she stressed that so much. She could foresee things that were going to happen. I had no idea and didn't understand that could happen. But she saw a lot of devastation and destruction in her time, and not much progress made for us as Native people. So I see why that's so important. And I understand that's why we live the way we do today. And another, I mean, big factor of that is because of cost. But for me, seeing my parents getting older or needing help with things, then I feel at times, sometimes I don't want to go away or don't want to go somewhere. I want to stay home where they are, because the time frame is very short. The time you have to learn from them is very short window, and it's so important because so much has been taken from us. And the food and the system we live in is only taking our people even faster. So it is very difficult to hold on to this. You always have memories, but the short time we were given with our family members and our elders is such a blessing. No amount of money could ever replace that, or could ever be switched out for those experiences. Because if you don't, I feel very sad for people who don't have those experiences, those good experiences, with grandparents and aunties and people taking care of you and fighting for you, sometimes literally fighting to protect you. That's so, there's so much power in that, being able to grow up and see these female figures and male figures working and trying so hard to keep the culture alive. I may not have understood it when I was very young. I may have taken it for granted that they were always going to be there, to protect us and help us. And I really, 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 I mean, I do miss many family members. I remember so many things, and so many of them are gone now. So it is very scary, because one day there'll be a time when Chumash no longer exist. And, that's all to blame on colonialism. They have taken and stripped everything away from us, and that's always been their goal. The fact that we have survived and thrived for so long, there, as you see, they're still trying very, 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 very much to get rid of these things. They don't like the connection that we have as family and as people, because it's something they've never had. They don't understand it. And they will never have it because of the way they are.
I think too, like, I think all about, especially now in these times, BIPOC communities are relying on each other. Like we've always relied on each other, and that looks like people coming out and being on ICE patrol, people spreading the number for ICE hotlines. That looks like uplifting other community members of BIPOC and their histories and highlighting them. Like I think that, or like, people when they need a room, or need money for rent, like there's always community calls that you can find and
Donate and help.
And I think that even though it is in the wake of capitalism and because of the things that capitalism does inflict on us, but despite that, we still are choosing to come together and to be a community and help each other out. And I think that's what matters. Like, yes, we are different people, but at the end of the day, we're coming together because we don't want each other to suffer. We don't want anybody else to suffer, even if they're not a part of our own community. So yes, it is in the wake of awful things, but I think, like, really, if we just look at it, people are practicing being in community and helping each other now.
I love that answer. I've loved every answer. Thank you guys so much for being here and being vulnerable with what you were sharing. I know not all of it is super easy. It's not exactly an easy topic to discuss in general. So I really appreciate the fact that you guys were willing to share so much information with us. I hope that in a couple of weeks we'll be able to schedule another round just so that we can keep giving the people what they want. Because if they're anything like me, they're going to listen to the recording and they're going to be like, oh man, I need like 3 hours more of knowledge just to absorb. And so I appreciate you guys taking the time, and I'll definitely make sure to tag Justice for Chumash and any other information. But I wanted to know if you guys had anything left that you wanted to add that you felt like you didn't get a chance to cover so far.
I wouldn't say I just think it's really beautiful. You know, I see the people out there on the front lines doing patrols, sending out the text messages, and I have so much love and appreciation for these people because they are stronger than any political or legal figure that we see out there today. They are doing more. They're actually about the people. And it's one of the most beautiful things I've seen in my life outside of indigenous communities. And I understand that some of these also are also Mexican indigenous communities. But I think it's beautiful because it is a number one stance against colonialism, continuing to fight and help each other, which they hate the fact that we help each other or that we work together. Like I said, they will never understand it, but they're never going to break it. They can't. They haven't been able to do it for hundreds of years. And we're never gonna change that. Whether it's 100 years from now, it'll be other people out there patrolling, taking care of things. They're never gonna let it happen because of the work and the history. This is real history being made in real time.
Sorry, I just wanted to make sure in case Robin had anything else.
I think that's
No, I
it.
think
I
that's
think we
all.
shared
Okay.
shared a lot today.
Yes, yes. And I really do appreciate everything you're talking about with the patrollers doing more than our average politicians because that could not be more true. We have people in our community stepping up to offer anything ranging from self-defense classes to childcare watch to helping people pay for their rent. You know what I mean? And taking kids in and fostering them and until they're able to be reunited with their parents. And so there is just so many things that people on the ground are doing, and I agree wholeheartedly that they're doing significantly more than the average politician or political leader that we see right now. So, huge shout out to them. Shout out to you guys. Shout out to Justice for Chumash. Shout out to the 805 on DocuFund as well. You can report ICE at 805-870-8855. And they have resources on their website, 805ondocufund.org. And thank you guys so much for being here. And I look forward to our next conversation. I feel like we get to converse a little bit more each week. And that's great, but also I think it's indicative of where the world is at right now, unfortunately, as well. So I hope that you guys are continuing to take care of yourself the way that you're helping take care of our community.
Yeah, definitely. That's an important one to always take your time to rest and do what you got to do. Just don't take too long because getting comfortable is not the place to be.
Yes. I like how even in your last sentence you had to throw out an extra little one-liner to keep us on our toes. I love it, as we should be. Definitely time for care, but not necessarily time to forget.
Yeah.
Um, so thank you guys so much. I hope you have a wonderful night.
You too. Thank you so much.
Thank you guys. Bye.
Bye bye.